this medieval heritage may regard this judgment as surprising, but it is indisputable that this critic, from his distant vantage ground, has recognised the uniqueness of the Chronicle and understood its compelling interest both for the historian and the student of literary history. The former declares that none among all the materials for English history possesses authority for a longer period than the series of annals which it is convenient to call the Old English Chronicle, from the age of the Saxon migration to the anarchy of Stephen's reign. They continue to offer information which may be rejected but cannot be ignored. The criticism of the Chronicle is the basis of early English historiography. The literary critic finds in these same annals the beginnings of English prose, the unmannered simplicity of which found continuous expression in devotional books and vernacular sermons down to Tudor times, when it became the language of Moore and Tyndale, and the instrument in the following century of the translators of the authorised version of the Bible. This is high and justifiable praise, but what may astonish most is that the Chronicle was written in English at all, in an age when historical, legal and diplomatic documents were almost always written in Latin. In this it is unique, and it is a remarkable fact that its scribes chose English rather than Latin as their medium, particularly since there is good reason to suppose that none of the early documents from which the earliest annals were derived were written in English. It has been frequently pointed out that English was the only vernacular language. Except Irish, to be used for historical purpose in northwest Europe in the Dark Ages. Indeed, the Irish annals and an early Russian chronicle, which goes by the name of Nestor's, were the only other histories to use their native tongue in the whole of Europe before 1200. This fact is of far-reaching importance, for if the Chronicle is essential to the historian as the fundamental authority for Old English history, it is also the first national continuous history of a Western nation in its own language, and the first great book in English prose. In its pages can be traced the continuous development of early English prose style throughout the centuries of the Saxon period to the middle of the 12th century. The historians insist that English literature was dead at the time of the conquest, remarks R. W. Chambers, yet so long as there is any chronicle at all, they cannot get on without its telling phrases. The first English short story appears in Annal 755, and the beginnings of English biography go back to the chronicler's character study of William the Conqueror. If the range of early narrative prose is to be measured, contrast the first halting, laconic entries with the vigour and clarity of the writing in the 10th century on the one hand, and the individual, often impassioned phrasing of Ethelred and Stephen's days on the other. If the language seldom proliferates into an extra surprise of simile or metaphor or revealing detail, and lacks all artifice and embellishment, yet it is all the more successful as a chronicler's instrument. Why was English used? Perhaps it must be confessed by default, because of the decay of Latin studies and the almost complete disappearance of spoken Latin in this country in surpassing the immediate requirements of the mere unambitious analyst. Neither was the record of passing events perfunctory or haphazard, nor undertaken merely when their importance could not fail to arrest the analyst's attention, nor made by men in a monkish solitude, familiar with the lettuces of the convent garden, but hearing only faint, dim murmurs of the great transactions which they slowly jot down in the barren Chronicle. Okay, we're going to leave that there. This is quite a long introduction. So this picture is an 11th century Easter table with annals. This is from the British Museum collection. Okay, let's get to the beginning. Here we go. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. In the year of Christ's nativity, 494, Cerdic and Sinric his son landed at Cerdic with 5 ships. Cerdic was the son of Elessa, the son of Esla, the son of Gewis, the son of Wick, the son of Freyawine, the son of Frituga, the son of Brand, the son of Beldog, the son of Woden. 6 years after they landed, they conquered the kingdom of Wessex. These were the first kings who conquered the land of Wessex from the Welsh. He held the kingdom 16 years, and when he died, his son Sinric succeeded to the kingdom and held it 26 years. When he passed away, his son Ceawlin succeeded and held it 17 years. When he died, Ceawl succeeded to the kingdom and held it 6 years. When he died, his brother Ceawlwulf succeeded and ruled 17 years, and their ancestry goes back to Cerdic. Then Cynegils, Ceawlwulf's brother's son, succeeded to the kingdom and ruled 31 years, and he was the first of the West Saxon kings to receive baptism. Then Cenwalh succeeded and held it 31 years, and that Cenwalh was the son of Cynegils. Then his queen, Cyaxbra, held the kingdom 1 year after him. Then Eswine, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded to the kingdom and held it 2 years. Then Centwine, the son of Cynegils, succeeded to the kingdom of Wessex and ruled 7 years. Then Cadwalla, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded to the kingdom and held it 3 years. Then Ain, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded to the kingdom of Wessex and held it 37 years. This island of Britain is 800 miles long and 200 miles broad. asked the Scots if they might dwell there, but they would not allow them, for they said that they could not all live together there. And then, said the Scots, we can nevertheless give you good advice. We know another island to the east of this, where you can settle if you wish, and if anyone resists you, we will help you to conquer it. Then went the Picts, and took possession of the northern part of this land. The southern part was held by the Britons, as we have said, and the Picts asked the Scots for wives, and they were given to them on condition that they always choose their royal race in the female line, and they observed this for a long time afterwards. Then it happened, after the course of years, that a part of the Scots went from Ireland into Britain. And conquered part of the land. The leader of their army was called Rioda. From this they are named Dale Riadai. 60 years before Christ was born, Julius Caesar, emperor of the Romans, came to Britain with 80 ships. At first he was harassed by fierce fighting and led a great part of his host to destruction. Then he left his host to remain with the Irish and went into Gaul, and there gathered the 100 ships, and with them he went back into Britain. And when they first joined battle, the emperor's tribune, who was called Labianus, was slain. Then went the British and staked all the ford of a certain river with great sharp piles under the water. That river was called the Thames. When the Romans became aware of this, they would not cross over that ford. Then the Britons fled to the protection of the woods. The emperor took very many of the principal strongholds with great labour and went back into Gaul. Octavian reigned 56 years, and in the 42nd year of his reign, Christ was born. The astrologers from the east came to show honour to Christ, and became of Herod's persecution. The children in Bethlehem were slain, and he died, stabbed by his own hand, and his son Archelaus succeeded to the kingdom. Okay, so I'm going back to the succession of kings on this side. Then Ethelred, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded and held it 14 years. Then Guthred, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded and held it 17 years. Then Sigebert, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded and held it 1 year. Then Cynewulf, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded and held it 31 years. Then Beatric, whose ancestry goes back to Cerdic, succeeded and held it 16 years. Then Egbert succeeded to the kingdom and held it 37 years and 7 months. Then his son Ethelwulf succeeded and held it 18.5 years. That Ethelwulf was the son of Egbert, the son of Aelmund, the son of Eapha, the son of Eopa, the son of Ingeld, the son of Genred, and In, Cuthber, and Granbra were also children of Genred. Genred was the son of Ceolwald, the son of Guthwulf, the son of Guthwine, the son of Gelin. Then Ethelbald, Ethelwulf's son, succeeded to the kingdom and held it 5 years. Then his brother Ethelbert succeeded and held it 5 years. Then their brother Ethelred succeeded and held it 5 years. Then their brother Alfred succeeded to the kingdom when he was 23 years old since his ancestors had first conquered the land of Wessex from the Welsh. 60 years before the incarnation of Christ, the Emperor Julius Caesar was the first of the Romans to come to Britain, and hard-pressed the Britons in battle and overcame them, but could not gain a kingdom there. So, what we see is a continuation in the following pages. So we are moving forward to the year 871. Then his brother Alfred, son of Ethelwulf, succeeded to the kingdom of Wessex, and 1 month later King Alfred fought with a small force against the entire host at Wilton, and for a long time there, during the day, drove them off, and the Danes had possession of the place of slaughter. And in the course of the year, 9 general engagements were fought against the host in the kingdom to the south of the Thames, besides those innumerable forays which Alfred, the king's brother, and Ealdorman, king's thanes, rode on, which were never counted, and in the course of this year were slain 9 jarls and 1 king, and this year the West Saxons made peace with the host. 871. In this year went the host to London from Reading, and there took winter quarters, and the Mercians made peace with the host. 872. In this year the host took winter quarters at Torksey. 873. In this year the host went from Lindsey to Repton, and there took winter quarters and drove the king, buried overseas, 22 years after he succeeded to the kingdom, and conquered the entire kingdom. And he went to Rome, and there resided, and his body lies in St. Mary's Church, in the school of the English. And the same year they gave the government of the kingdom of Mercia into the hands of Ceolwulf, a foolish king's thane, and he swore them oaths and gave hostages that the kingdom should be at their disposal whenever they might require it, and that he should hold himself in readiness to serve the needs of the host with all who would follow him. 874. In this year went the host from Repton, and Halfton went with a part of the host into Northumbria and took winter quarters. On the River Tyne, and the host overran that land and made frequent raids against the Picts and against the Strathclyde Britons and Guthrum and Untitled and Anand. The 3 kings went from Repton to Cambridge with a great host and remained there a year. And in the summer 875 King Alfred sailed out to sea with a fleet and fought against 7 ships' companies, and captured one of them and put the others to flight. 875. In this year the host eluded the West Saxon levies and got into Wareham. And 876 the king made peace with the host, and they swore him oaths on the sacred ring, which before they would never do to any nation, that they would quickly leave his kingdom. And then under cover of this agreement they evaded the English levies by night, and the mounted host got into Exeter. And in this year Halfdan shared out the lands of Northumbria, and they were engaged in ploughing and in making a living for themselves. his levies as far as Exeter, but could not overtake them before they were in the fortress, where they could not be got at, and there they gave him preliminary hostages, as many as he would have, and swore solemn oaths, and then kept a firm peace. And then in autumn 877 the host departed into Mercia, and some of it they shared out, and some they gave to Ceolwulf. Just as an aside, if you're wondering what they mean by the host, they're talking about the Vikings, the Viking Raiders, or the Scandinavians. 878. In this year the host went secretly in midwinter after Twelfth Night to Chippenham, and rode over Wessex and occupied it, and drove a great part of the inhabitants over sea. And of the rest, the greater part they reduced to submission, except Alfred the King, and he with a small company moved under difficulties through woods and into inaccessible places in marshes. And in the same winter, a brother of Ivor and Halfdan was in Wessex in Devon with 23 ships, and there he was slain, and 800 men with him, and 40 men of his retinue. And the Easter after, King Alfred with a small company built a fortification at Athelney, and from that fortification, with men of that part of Somerset nearest to it, he continued fighting against the host. Then, in the 7th week after Easter, he rode to Egbrideston, to the east of Selwood, and came to meet him there all the men of Somerset and Wiltshire, and that part of Hampshire which was on this side of the sea, and they received him warmly. And one day later he went from those camps to Illay Oak, and one day later to Eddington, and there he fought against the entire host and put it to flight, and pursued it up to the fortification, and laid siege there a fortnight. And then the host gave him preliminary hostages and solemn oaths that they would leave the kingdom, and promise him in addition that their king would receive baptism. And they fulfilled this promise in the following manner. And 3 weeks later the king Guthrum came to him, one of 30 of the most honourable men in the host, at Alla, which is near Athelney, where the king stood, sponsored to him at baptism, and the ceremony of the removal of the baptismal fillet took place at Wedmore, and he was 12 days with the king, who greatly honoured him and his companions with riches. 878. In this year the host went to Cirencester from Chippenham and remained there 1 year. And this year a band of pirates gathered and took up quarters at Fulham on Thames, and the same year the sun was eclipsed for 1 hour of the day. 879. In this year the host went from Cirencester into East Anglia, and occupied that land and shared it out. And the same year the host which had occupied Fulham went overseas to